to? They can sell it to anybody they want to. Let's do this in slow motion though. A sells the property to D. D now is a 1/3 owner of this property, but he is not a joint tenant, is he? He is a tenant in common with B and C. What are B and C with each other? Joint tenants with each other. C dies. C dies. What's going to happen to C's property? He goes to B because B is his what? Is D his survivor? He did not have joint tenancy. So now D owns 1/3. B owns 2/3. What's going to happen now if B dies? It goes to his heirs because there's no one left to be joint with, right? Okay, and then stop. That's as complicated as it's going to get. What happens on a sale? What happens at a death? If you can run through that permutation right there, you are as good as you need to be on joint tenancy, okay? Don't let it hurt your head anymore. All right, that takes us through the ownership of our real property. Let's see how we did. I think we brought up all the words that were there. Okay, we can relax for a minute. We can relax for a minute. Here's why. Condominium ownership. Condominium ownership. Why are we even talking about condominium ownership? Because we're in a section that talks about how you can hold title with other persons, right? Okay. So when you talk about condominium form of ownership, do you understand? I own my individual unit, at least the airspace within my unit. Do you remember that wording? And then how are the common areas held? That's what's going to be important for condominium. How are the common areas held? Your tenants in common, obviously without the right of partition, but having said that, your tenants in common. And look at this, I have a question somewhere. I can't remember if it's my final or my midterm, but it speaks to this case. We are all tenants in common in the common area, right? But having said that, if I don't pay my taxes, if Chris doesn't pay his taxes on unit 85, is that going to affect the rest of you? And the answer I'm looking for is no. It'll cause a tax lien on my property, but it will not encumber the common areas. You understand why and where I'm going with that? So condominium form of ownership, watch out for how those common areas are held, okay? Do you remember me using the word limited common areas? And for our purposes, let's keep this very, very simple at this point. Limited common areas or limited common elements, assigned parking, assigned storage, assigned balcony, okay? If you'll keep it that simple, you're going to be okay. You also remember that because of condominiums past, they haven't always had a very savory past. The condominium law of 1980-something, it's not a history test, it's not important, okay? So having said that, there's going to have to be requirements of the developer of a condominium. For example, they're going to have to report things like bylaws, their plans. Their plans are going to have to be recorded at the Register of Deeds so that you can go look them up if you're interested in that. But very importantly, when purchasing a new residential condominium, you have how many days right of rescission? 7. It was important that I had to set my glasses down to tell you that, okay? If that helps. To tell you condo, I had to have 2 hands. 7-day right of rescission. What if you're buying a resale? Do you have, no, with a resale, you are not given the right of rescission. Actually, you're given what's known as a resale certificate, and what that does is it tells you the ongoing cost of owning the condominium. You know, how special assessments and things like that are calculated, monthly fees. Condominium. Why are we talking about it? Shared ownership. Common areas in this particular case. Also remember, condominium is different from a townhouse. Because in a townhouse, and again, if you want the visual, in condos, can you stack condos on top of each other? You literally can. Townhouses, you can't do that. Because in a townhouse, you own not only the house, but also the land you're sitting on to the highest heavens, including the walls on the house. And importantly, how are the common areas held in a townhouse community? The homeowners association owns the common, and obviously you are a voting member of the HOA. You got that much between those two? Cooperatives, please do not stay up late at night on cooperatives. The only thing I want you to know about a co-op is that what you own is you own stock in a corporation that owns a building. By virtue of the ownership of that stock, you are given a proprietary lease and a right to live there. That sound familiar? Okay. And then also be familiar with the concept of the board of directors has the ability to approve or deny people from buying in the co-op. This is not meant to get around fair housing laws, but as long as it's it doesn't violate public policy, the board of directors can affirm or deny people to buy into the cooperative. And for some reason, I didn't get into timeshares, but let's go ahead and take on timeshare right here. But all I want to take on about timeshare right now is just to make sure that you remember timeshare is brought to you by the number 5. Notice I did not have to take off my glasses to talk about timeshare, okay? The number 5. When purchasing a timeshare, first of all, let's define what a timeshare is. Ownership of property for 5 or more separate time periods over 5 or more separate years. When purchasing a timeshare, you have a 5-day right of rescission, okay? And if that dadgum developer doesn't give you the public offering statement, then the developer can be fined how much? By whom? By the real estate commission. By the real estate commission. Can the commission ever fine salespersons, timeshare salespersons? No, because they can never fine licensees. Reprimand, censure, suspend, revoke. You've got it. There is only one place that the number 10 comes up in regards to timeshare, and if you don't want to study it, it's fine with me. The only time the number 10 comes up in regards to timeshare is the developer, once they sell you the property and you give them earnest money, then what they have to do is they have to keep it in a trust account for a minimum of how many days? 10. My logic, the way I picture it in my head is, if you cancel on the 5th day, mail them a letter, it gives the letter time to get there. I don't know if that's true or not, but it helps me memorize it that way. It's the only time that it's going to be anything other than 5. And if I were you, I'd hedge my bets. If I saw timeshare, I'd look for number 5, and that's what my answer would be. Okay? Let's see, encumbrances to real property, liens. You know, and again, it feels so good talking about these after having, you know, think about all the energy we spent talking about some of these topics. Now that you've heard them, they're not quite as scary. I understand you want clarification, but having said that, the words aren't scary. What's the idea of a lien? How is it an encumbrance? Well, basically, it's a charge against property, and if you don't pay me what you said you were going to pay me, then I'm going to take your property. That's a pretty major encumbrance, right? Okay? Liens fall into 2 categories. They are specific or they can be general. You're not going to get confused with understanding that your mortgage, or now you know the word deed of trust. Your deed of trust is specific to a particular address, right? Okay. Your real property taxes, they are specific to a particular address, right? Still feeling good? Okay. And then, by the way, in talking about real property taxes, I've told you this a couple of times now, so take it seriously. Real property taxes and special assessments, how are they similar? How are they different? Be prepared for that for test purposes. I don't think it's super high level. Real property taxes, they go on forever. Special assessments, it was a one-time. Now, the government may finance it for you over the course of a few years, but once it's paid for, it's done. Do you also remember that special assessments are only going to be charged to the people that benefit? Do you remember that? Okay. There's one thing I did not really hammer into your head. I'll hammer it into your head right now about special assessments. Special assessments, how are they calculated? In other words, how do we determine that yours is $7,500 and yours is $8,300? A common way of calculating is based on your property. Oftentimes, it may be based on your road frontage. It could be based on your total square footage. Okay? It could be based on the value. Dennis's property is worth more than Patricia's is, so therefore he's charged more. Any of these are okay. Deb, don't pick up your calculator and start calculating. Just understand that these are 3 ways that they are commonly calculated. You see where I'm going with that? All right, and then finally, the mechanics liens. Again, guys, if the number 120 does not automatically pop into your head in regards to mechanics liens, you're studying it wrong. All right, mechanics liens for a contractor who has done work on the property, and so they have a right to have a lien on the property where they did the work. That's why it's a specific lien. And then because they can't start and finish their work on the same day, they are given special protection, and that's what the mechanics lien is. So say this with me real quickly. They have 120 days from what day? First day they started. They have up to 120 days to record from the last day of delivery of goods and services, 120 days from the last day to record. And if they will, their lien lien priority will go all the way back to the first day of delivery of goods and services. With that bit of information and a little careful reading, you can answer any question at all having to do with a mechanic's lien. The 180 days, if I file my mechanic's lien within the requisite 120 days and you still don't pay me, I have up to 180 to file a lawsuit against you to collect on my lien. No. The 120 is part of the 180, okay? So it doesn't start a new count. So what you're going to do is you're going to focus on the 120. Once you get cocky that you have that, if you would like to study the 180, knock yourself out. Linda, that has everything to do if you have to file a lawsuit to exercise your lien. Okay? The only other thing about mechanic's lien, and I wonder if I put this in the notes here. I did not. If you ever see a question about a lien agent, as of, I can't remember what year, 2 or 3 years ago, North Carolina passed a statute that said if the mechanic's lien was going to be greater than $30,000. So I want you to associate a lien agent with a mechanic's lien over $30,000. You don't have to understand the implementation of it. What you need to understand is if you ever see the concept of a lien agent, that would only be for work that would require a mechanic's lien of over $30,000, okay? And then stop there. I'll give you $1 if it comes up on the exam. General liens. General liens, not heavy lifting here, so we can relax for just a moment. General liens. In regards to the general lien, these are going to be, matter of fact, let's just cut to the chase. Most likely a judgment lien, right, would fall into this category. So you did not pay your credit cards. You didn't pay your credit cards. They filed a judgment against you. Now remember, judgment liens are not specific to any one property, but judgment liens could attach any property in the county where the judgment is recorded. Can you understand that concept? Level 1, honestly, on that.
That's to the person, not to the lien.
Well, the way I often describe them is, judgment liens follow a person around, but what they really want is for you to get property so that they can attach it. Because they can attach any property, not specific property. Only where the judgment is recorded, though, okay? We were talking about the category of encumbrances, and then we talked about liens, and you kind of know my thoughts on that at this point. Notice, of course, if you miss a question about the Connor Act, and then you miss the test by 1 point, you're going to be mad still. You're going to be mad, okay? The Connor Act establishes lien priority. We'll get there in a minute, but you guys remember, there is no law that says you have to record. What the Connor Act says is if you don't record, you're not going to have any lien priority. And remember this, and at this point it's not hard to remember, okay? The Connor Act establishes lien priority based on the date and time of recordation of the lien or the deed. So you feel good about that? But remember the 2 exceptions that we've already talked about? Real property taxes always jump where? All the way to the priority lien. Okay? And then mechanics liens can jump other liens. Can mechanics liens jump a first mortgage? Can mechanics liens jump a first mortgage? Yeah, it actually can. It actually can. Can mechanics liens jump a real property tax lien? There's no way. And with that little bit of information, hopefully you can kind of clarify. But remember how many times the Connor Act comes on. Anything that needs to be in writing in the statute of frauds will be protected under the Connor Act if in fact you will record. Okay? Good. And then we talk about other encumbrances, restrictive covenants. Let's see what I have here on the bullet points and why I had each one of these. Does this make sense to you? Restrictive covenants are, we're in private restrictions, but restrictive covenants must be recorded to be enforceable. Make sense? Okay? You have to be able to go down to the register of deeds, pull it, and understand. Who enforces? Well, who created the restrictive covenants? The developer. And then once the developer leaves, it would be awesome if there was some type of entity like an HOA to oversee this. That way it's third party and you don't have to worry about personal issues. However, do you remember that any individual homeowner can enforce against others in the area if necessary? Okay, and don't worry too much about the process, but ultimately, let me ask you this. If I'm a homeowner, and you're a homeowner in the same neighborhood, even if you don't directly affect me, you remember the story I told about the dog in the back of the neighborhood? Even though that doesn't directly affect me, I can enforce against that person, right? Okay, and ultimately, if I had to, I could take him to court. I could file a case known as a what, starting with the letter I? Injunction, and the court would cease, would make them cease and desist, or potentially be charged for it. So in other words, it's a private restrictions, but we could actually use the courts, just like any lawsuit, actually. And then which rules, which one would rule in the event of a conflict with zoning? You remember that rule at this point? Yeah, anytime that there's a conflict, the most restrictive will always rule, okay? List pendants, to you guys, that's just a definition. Notice of pending litigation. Anytime someone files a lawsuit against a property, they file a list pendants to let you know that there's a lawsuit going on in the property. Just a definition. Easement's bigger deal. Easement's a little bigger deal. We're going to get to questions on easements clearly. Easements in gross, it's time to relax your mind and understand the crux of the easement in gross. In an easement gross, there's only one property, at least one property at a time, that is being encumbered. Remember, I used the utility easement as the best example of an easement in gross. Is everybody okay with the concept of a commercial easement in gross, like a utility easement, like an easement to Time Warner Cable or Spectrum or whoever they are at this point, an easement to PSNC Energy? Okay, Tommy, I don't see you doing this, but you're with me, right? Okay. I threw in a weird one, and I don't want you to get too bent out of shape about this for test purposes. If it confuses you, just put it on the back burner. But technically, the definition of an easement in gross is a personal easement. It just so happens that entities are treated as persons under the law. That's why Time Warner Cable would be considered to be an easement in gross. But what about if I gave you the right to walk across my beachfront property to get to the beach? You don't live nearby. This is not subject to you having land nearby. This is subject to me liking you. I give you an easement across my property. That is, in fact, an easement in gross, because it's for your benefit only. Jessica? Okay? Yeah, an easement in gross for the benefit of a person as opposed to a benefit of a tract of land. Okay, you see where I'm going there? Okay.
So what's the difference between the license thing? Because it's the person, not the lady.
The last one, I'm sorry?
The license, what's the difference between?
Oh, the difference between, now a license is just simply me letting you walk across the land. An easement in gross, the implication is that there is a written, recorded document that gives you that right, okay? I would rather give you a license, because if I give you a license, I can simply take it away and you no longer have the privilege, right? But if I give you a perpetual easement in gross, it's going to last as long as what lasts, Linda? As long as you do. Can you leave it to your heirs? No. Can you sell it to someone else? No. You do recognize commercial easements in gross could be sold to another entity though, right? Time Warner Cable sold to Spectrum, and so that changed our hands. Level one, so stay fairly tight with it, don't let your mind run too much. Here, the technical difference, if this makes sense to you, between an easement in gross and an appurtenant easement, is that an easement in gross is given for the benefit of a person or an entity, as opposed to an appurtenant easement, which is given for the benefit of a what? Tract of land. Okay, if I can get you to visualize that, that's the win on that. Speaking of which, on the appurtenant easement, clearly, how many tracts of land must there be involved? At least two tracts of land. And it's an appurtenant, and it's an easement. Remember, the definition of appurtenant is it runs with the land. Okay? And remember, the definition of an easement is it's a non-possessory interest in the property of another. Okay? So two tracts of land. One of the estates benefits from the estate. The estate that benefit is always known as what? Start with the letter D. The dominant. The one that serves is a servient estate, okay? And then which one of those can wake up one morning and just simply say, I don't need the easement. Only the dominant. The servient will serve as long as necessary. We do talk about termination of easements. One of the ways you terminate an easement is just simply to buy those pieces of property, right? Because you can't have an easement across your own property. It could be abandoned, but man, we're talking about clear abandonment before that would be the case. Sorry about that. Telemarketer, call me back and tell me what. I should just give it to one of you guys and let you answer. How can easements be created? The best way to create an easement is obviously in writing and recorded, right? But when I say an easement can be created by implication, what pops into your head? Give me an example of a property where an easement can be created by implication. Start with the letter L. Landlocked property. If I sell you a property, remember I cannot intentionally landlock you. So if I sold you a property that was landlocked, what I implied is that I would give you an easement across my property to get there, okay? That will be sufficient for our purposes. Best thing to do is create an easement in writing, but there are some cases where an easement will be implied by virtue of the fact that you intentionally landlock me. And then, you know, I have so much fun talking about prescription, but gosh, it's such a long shot that it's going to come up on the exam. An easement by prescription, that's the one where the guy was fishing on the river, okay? Easement by prescription, an easement gained through long-term adverse use. And about how long a period of time do you think that long-term adverse use should be? About 20 years, and then bam, move on. Okay, it's just not worth spending that much time studying. You clearly are going to be tested on the next word, encroachment. Okay, there's just no way you're not going to be tested on encroachment. So what I would recommend you do is have some common ones in mind. Common encroachments will be clearly a fence. Probably by far the most common encroachment is a fence. It could be something like a driveway that you build over the property line, an outbuilding that you build over the property line. Technically, trees and shrubbery could be because of airspace issues, right? I don't know that you would see that. And then here comes the important part. How do you uncover encroachments? How do you determine if they're encroachments? Through the survey process, okay? So a lot of little brief but important, and you're going to get it right, information on that. Property taxation and assessment. Let's see how much of this sounds familiar because we dealt with it in dealing with the powers of the government. Real property reevaluated for tax purposes once every 8 years. Did we say that? Rate can be adjusted every year. We said that. All property, we've never actually said this, and this is just kind of a factoid. There are some properties that are exempt from taxation, but I wouldn't worry too much about this. I would understand that there are some properties that exist that are exempt, and they fall into the category of things like nonprofits, elderly housing, some elderly housing, and religious institutions. But I wouldn't go any beyond that. Property should be this is actually an interesting bullet point right here. And when you wonder how we try to trick you on these exams, property has to be reevaluated at least once every 8 years, right? Octennial appraisal. When they reevaluate the property, ideally, the property is supposed to be pegged at what value? Market. Yeah, it's supposed to be pegged at market value. But that becomes the assessed value. And my point, of course, what I mean by that is, once your valuation is established, it stays the same for 8 years. But what do you hope happens to your market value? Okay, so be careful with those little factoids surrounding that. I throw in the information about the horizontal adjustment, but that would be a little bit of a long shot. Tax incidentals, notice my bullet points here. I've already mentioned one of them. Note the difference between what taxes pay versus what special assessments pay. And then, again, just one of those things we don't talk about a lot, so it's time to just remember it. If you ever see the word mill associated, a mill rate associated with taxes, just divide something by what? 1,000. You can divide the mill rate by 1,000, or you could divide the appraised value by 1,000, and then solve the problem just like you normally would. Mill rate 1,000, move on. Okay? Property description and transfer of title. Man, if we'd just done this to start with, we'd have been finished with this class like 6 weeks ago. You guys could have tested, already had your license if we'd just done this before. Let's take the easy portion. Look, we're realistically only talking about getting 1, maybe 2 questions out of this chapter right here. So let's go for the meat. Meets and bounds, distances and directions. Listen, if you understand these words and what they mean, you're probably going to be okay. Do you remember how the point of beginning goes with the meets and bounds? To know where you're going, you have to know where to start, okay? Call, C-A-L-L, how far and in what direction. Monument is a corner marker. All meets and bounds descriptions must end where they began. They must what? Close. Okay? So then let's take meets and bounds, let's set it aside. I got that if it comes up. Okay? And then, more commonly, you're likely to use reference to a recorded plat in what type of areas? What type of areas did I say you're most likely to? Say again? certainly subdivisions, but anywhere when you're in like an urban or suburban environment, okay, where everything has literally been platted. Make sense? However, you also have the possibility of a reference to a previously recorded document, a previously recorded deed, which most likely would happen in rural areas where everything has not been platted. Can you recognize, and just go back to your book and look at each one of these descriptions and say, if I saw that, Lot 5, Block 6, Happy Hill subdivision. Obviously, that's reference to a plat. Deed book page, or deed book 8000, page 463, that's reference to a previously recorded deed. Okay? So as long as you can recognize those, you're probably going to be okay. And weirdly enough, the one that you're absolutely going to get tested on is one that has nothing to do with the state of North Carolina, and that's the government rectangle survey system. I could spend an hour reteaching that to you, but I'm not. And you need to know your vocabulary, okay? In regards to the rectangular survey system, everything is going to be based on the grid, and that grid is going to start with a main. This is horizontal, right? Running east to west. These are the types of questions you literally may get. What's the name of this line? Start with the letter D. Baseline. It will, in fact, have to be intersected by a line running perpendicular to it, which would be north and south, right? And that line is called a principal meridian. The principal meridian will be the first one, okay? Running parallel to the baseline are going to be lines starting with the letter T. What are those lines? They're called township lines. And importantly, how far apart are the time? 6 miles. Thank you. Township lines are 6 miles apart on either side of the baseline. Running parallel to the principal meridian would be lines starting with the letter R. Range lines, and of course they are 6 lines as well. A 6 mile by 6 mile situation is known as a what? Township. The tract of land that's 6 miles by 6 miles is known as a township. A township has how many sections in it? 36. So therefore, each one of those sections is how many square miles? 1 square mile. See, I tricked you. You thought you knew where I was going. I tricked you on that. How many acres is 1 square mile? 640 acres, all right? And we'll get back a little bit later. If you want to ask me about the math question, I will remind you when it comes to the rectangle survey system. What I do is I multiply the bottom number, the denominator. See, it's always going to be a 4 or 2, right? And then I divide that into 640. If you'll remind me at a break, we'll do a couple of those just to make sure you're fresh for the exam on those. Rectangle survey system, as I'm looking at those things, township, section, you know, I even put the word check in there, which is a little bit of a long shot, but why not? I mean, as long as we're, a check was put in, was devised to take into consideration the curvature of the earth. Okay, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Let's get the transfer of title. And the transfer of title here, I'm doing it in a slightly different order than what I did during the class, and the reason I am is because this is actually the way I like to learn it, because it makes more sense. It flows better like this. Transfer of title can occur by descent. If you own real property, you can transfer title by descent. It is said that you died intestate. All right? Intestate means you didn't have a what? Will. Intestate, not testate, not testamentary disposition, okay? And if you didn't leave a will, how are we going to figure out who the property goes to? We go to the Intestate Succession Act. The state doesn't want your property, okay? You can make it easy by writing a will, or the fact of the matter is, if I'm married and own property as tenancy by the entirety, I don't even need a will, right? It's just going to go to my spouse. But if that's not the situation, the Intestate Succession Act says, do you have a spouse? Do you have kids? Do you have mother and father? Do you have brothers, sisters, etc., etc.? Why does the state have to go through that process? Because you didn't leave a will. All right? Anyway, if you die without a will, intestate succession. If you die with a will, then the property is going to go to whoever you left it in the will, assuming that it doesn't violate public policy. If I own the property as tenants by the entirety, I can't leave it to my mistress. That would violate public policy, okay? The survivorship would rule in that particular case. So, in regards to the will, the executor, the person named in the will who can oversee the administration of the will, and let's get an extra point as long as we're here. Can an executor be paid?
Yes.
An executor can be paid. They can't go out and buy a bunch of real estate signs and start listing property, but they can be paid for the act for which they were executors for, right? Okay, and then probate, the judicial determination of the validity of a will. Most wills are presumptively valid, but the courts will open them up. It's a public reading, right? I mean, it could involve the transfer of real property, which is public. So judicial determination of the validity of a will. Let's just check, make sure everything's okay. And then finally, a devise. A devise is a gift of real property by will, as opposed to a bequest, which is a gift of personal property by will. Now, having said that, I've been told on the state exam, it's possible that they may simply use the word bequest to describe any leaving of property, okay? So on the exam, they will not play these two against each other. They will just simply describe that if I died with a will, the people who received the property are not necessarily my heirs, they are my beneficiaries, whoever I left them to. I left them a bequest. It could be money, a car, or apparently real property for test purposes, okay? Let's see, continuing forward, voluntary alienation. Man, I hope they ask us questions about that one, because that's easy, right? Voluntary alienation. I either sold it to you or I gave it to you. Transfer of title by will. I'm sorry, by deed. And then involuntary alienation. I love this right here because it makes such a great question. Involuntary alienation. I didn't want to get rid of the property. Having said that, someone took it from me for one reason or the other. What's it called if the government takes the property for public use? Eminent domain, condemnation under eminent domain. What's it called if the bank takes it from you because you didn't make your payments? Foreclosure, okay. And then what's it called when someone squats on your property for the requisite period of time in an effort to take title? Adverse possession. And in regards to adverse possession, you have to remember this. The standard statute of adverse possession is how many years? 20 years. Unless you're trying to make a claim of adverse possession under what? Color of title, and then it's only how many years? 7 years. Let's go back to the 20-year statute just real quickly, and this is a caution for you guys. And look, there's a star and it's underlined, so I'm not too worried about this. But remember this, open use of the property. Now, it doesn't mean that the owner of the property can actually see me doing it. It means I'm not trying to hide it. The fact that the owner lives in New York does not mean I'm not using it openly. Okay? Continuous means continuous. If you read a test question and it talks about things like sporadic or intermittent use or something like that, that means it's not continuous. Okay? Exclusive, adverse, notorious for 20 plus years. Adverse possession, I've heard some people say they got as many as 3 test questions on adverse possession, which, by the way, I think you should look at that as a good thing. Okay? Because based on the information I just told you, I mean, bang, 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 you got it right there. Also remember this, adverse possession never happens automatically. Never happens automatically. If you believe you have a lawsuit, what you need to do is take them to court under what is known as a suit to quiet title. And if you ever see the word quiet title in regards to real property, a quiet title suit, these are used to take care of disputes regarding property line. Quiet title suits are to take care of disputes regarding property lines. Does that make sense? And clearly that's what adverse possession is. Okay? Good, good. Oh, and by the way, there's one type of involuntary alienation after you die. What's that called? Starting with the letter E. SG. SG. Perfect, perfect. Essential elements of a valid deed. Essential elements of a valid deed. Let's knock this one out real quickly here. Look, I've got them listed there. I could read them to you, but by this point you clearly can do that yourself. But remember, what do I think they're